Well, greetings and welcome to this webinar series, Climate Change, Climate Justice, Climate Action, the Basics for Churches. This is the sixth and final webinar in this series, and this webinar is focused on climate action, the role of the church. This series is offered by the California-Nevada Climate Justice Task Force of the California Annual Conference of the United Methodist Church, which we can shorten to the acronym KENKIJ-TIFNAC-OMK. It's quite a long title. Anyways, Reverend Sharon Delgado and myself have been organizing this series with many other inspiring guests. Tonight we'll feature Reverend Dale Weatherspoon, Reverend Richenda Fairhurst, Gregory Stevens, and Kristina Sinks. But before we begin, let's start with a prayer. So, loving Creator God, we ask that you inspire us who will be sharing this on this webinar, and all those who hear. We are your people. We are in love with your creation. Help us to be good stewards. Help us to empower your people to do your work in this world of healing, stewarding, and protecting this precious planet. I pray this in your holy name. Amen. So let's begin by welcoming Reverend Dale Weatherspoon. Dale is the pastor of Easter Hill United Methodist Church in Richmond, and Dale will speak on the role of the church in relation to justice, including environmental and climate justice. Welcome, Reverend Dale.
Thank you, Brother Andrew. Appreciate that. And good evening to everyone. Just thinking of that scripture that says from Psalm 24, verse 1, the earth is the Lord's and everything in it. And you kind of see that picture in my background of the San Francisco Bay, and just thinking what a beautiful area that we live in. And God's creation is a beautiful place. Yes, we know due to wildfires and natural disasters, places become desolate. But we're thankful for the regrowth that happens. But we are called to take care of God's creation. We are called to care for God's creation, to be good stewards of God's creation, not just so that we can enjoy it, but so that future generations can enjoy what God has created and provided for God's people. I was thinking of another scripture that says that we're called to love the Lord our God with our mind, body, and our soul, and that we're to love our neighbors as ourselves. And I believe that as we care for the creation, we are actually caring for our neighbors. We're ensuring that our neighbors have clean water, that our neighbors have fresh air, that our neighbors can have fresh food. And that just shows our love for our neighbors. There was an old saying years ago that said, think globally and act locally. And so this evening, as I was thinking about my part of the presentation, I was thinking about how we can act locally as individuals and as a church, and the work that we're called to do, the advocacy work that we're called to do. Thinking about how I live, and thinking about individuals in my congregations that I have served. One of the things that we can do, and I hope you have pencil and paper so that you may be able to jot some of these things down, because thank you, Andrew, thank you, because it really is a list, and you may already be doing some of these, and there's Greg's got his pencil, that you may be doing some of these already, and some of these may be new to you. But one of the things we can always do is start with an energy audit. And I think PG&E, if you're in the East Bay MUD, the water utility district, those organizations can come and help to do energy audits to see where we can tighten up and conserve more. One of those simple things that we've been doing for years now is replacing the incandescent bulbs with LED bulbs. They just last longer. It saves us on installation costs. It saves us on throwing those old bulbs away in the garbage, the dumps. Insulation. I know I've lived in some places where it gets cold in the house, and we've had to add extra installation, or we put things along the door, whether it's tape or it's some kind of material that we put underneath the door, so the air is not coming through. I know Greg will maybe talk a little bit about this when he does his part on California Power and Light later in the presentation. Fixing leaky faucets, replacing toilets with low flow toilets and shower heads. You know, I've been in a parsonage where the windows were replaced with double pane windows. Boy, that kept the house a lot cooler, warmer in the winter and cooler in the summer. It also reduced the outside noise. And so replacing windows. Energy efficient appliances. Sometimes we've had our refrigerators, freezers for 20 years, and they still seem to be working, but they may not be as efficient as they could be. Here's one. Some of you may remember the old clotheslines. We used to put our clothes out on the rack to be dried by nature, and now we throw them in the dryer. If you don't have a clothesline, there's places, Walmart, Target, other stores that have those clothes racks where you can put your clothes on the rack and just set them outside and let them dry naturally. Turning off lights when you're not in a room. So those are some things that we can do as individuals. And I know some people are buying electric cars, so they're not depending on the fossil fuels. And we really do need to work at reducing our consumption of the fossil fuels. You're going to hear some of these same things I just mentioned when I start talking about what we can do in the church. And we are encouraged in our churches to do energy audits. We're encouraged to be in our churches to recycle. You can always call the recycling agency in your community that can bring you recycle bins for inside of your church. So much like you do recycling at home, you can do recycling at church, and that's another way to help. Fixing leaky faucets in the church. Those drip, drip, drips, they can add up to energy costs. I know in one of my churches, we kept going in the bathroom and finding the water was running. And we didn't know whether that water had been running for a few minutes or it had been running since the day before. So replacing, not only replacing leaky faucets, but installing faucets that have the automatic shutoff. Again, changing all the bulbs to LED bulbs, low flow toilets. Again, energy efficient appliances. Another place I would find in the churches, sometimes I'd come in and lights would be on in the church. And so we replaced a lot of our rooms with the automatic shutoff timers so that we wouldn't leave lights on, particularly overnight. And then considering installing solar to reduce our energy costs. We know in the church, the high expenses are pastor salaries and healthcare, but here comes right behind that are those energy costs, and trying to find ways to reduce the cost of our energy, be more efficient, and use what God has given us, God's nature, the sun, to power our churches. Planting a garden for the church members and for those in the community, that they would have fresh vegetables and staying away from those pesticides and those chemicals, which is also a reminder as I get ready to talk about advocacy work, how we're advocating for the folks that work in the fields that are dealing with a lot of the pesticides. And we need to help protect them and fight for legislation that keeps them safe, keeps them from harm. And then lastly, I give that plug again, working with California Power, Interfaith Power and Light. They're there for us to assist us as churches And what we do in the churches, we can also replicate in our homes. Lastly, I want to talk about advocacy. We are called to be advocates, fighting for God's justice, creation care, caring for one another. One of the things that's really important is trying to teach our kids, and I would say some adults, how to dispose of trash. You know, it irks me when I'm driving down the freeway and I see people throwing cigarettes or garbage out on the street. When I see kids by the local school, you know, getting food from the fast food, but they're throwing the garbage on the street. You know, sometimes I roll down my window and say, hey, wait and put that in the trash can. We want to take care of the environment. You know, we don't want rodents and all of these things. We want our neighborhoods to look nice and beautiful. And so trying to teach our young people, and like I say, some of the adults, how to properly dispose of the trash. Being advocates, here in Richmond, we have trains that come through our community. And particularly, we're having coal trains coming through, trains that were carrying coal. And the coal dust, because the trains weren't covered, the coal dust would be blowing into the neighborhoods. And these trains weren't going through the wealthy neighborhoods, they were going through the neighborhoods of color. And the coal dust would appear on people's car windows. They would appear on people's window seals. Our kids were breathing that coal dust in and getting asthma. And so they're going to school and they're sick and not really able to study. And so we had some organizations here in Richmond that mobilized community organizing. We're going to city council meetings advocating to get the coal trains out of Richmond. And we were successful. We got a moratorium on those coal trains. Unfortunately, the moratorium is a little bit down the road. And so the coal companies are kind of doubling down, trying to make as much money as they can before that moratorium really takes it to effect. But what I'm saying is we have to advocate. We have to advocate for cleaner neighborhoods, for safer neighborhoods. In many poor neighborhoods, the dump sites are located in those neighborhoods. And so you get the smell, the stench that's coming from those, especially on the hot days. And then there's those health impacts that come. And so how do we advocate for safer, better dump sites, if you will, or how can we dispose of the waste in some other ways and not just putting them in the poorer communities? I know folks will say, I don't want them in my backyard. It's got to go somewhere, but why does it have to go into the poorer communities, neighborhoods? Again, want to be able to provide our congregations with resources, resources that help reduce their monthly expenses. Maybe we can be in a ministry of buying LED bulbs to give to people in neighborhoods, particularly low-income folks, so that they can help reduce their energy costs, that they would have money to spend on food or healthcare or gas, as gasoline prices have gone back up again. So how do we let our neighbors know where the resources are as a church so that our neighborhoods can become more energy efficient? We've been reading in the news about Mississippi, and we've long heard about Flint. And so helping to ensure and advocating for those communities, sending letters to the legislatures and city officials in those communities advocating for safer water. We should be able to turn on our tap and get good, clean water and not have to worry about it impacting our health. I know there are some churches that are doing work with water wells in other countries. So that the water is more accessible and people in those countries and communities don't have to walk miles just to get clean water, fresh water. And then I know we've seen a lot in the news, and I know Sharon has been doing some work around stopping pipelines. You know, we really need to reduce our dependency on oil and look at alternative oil energy sources, whether it's wind or solar or renewable renewables, hydrogen, and those kinds of things. And so we really need to begin looking at other ways that we can advocate to be a more energy efficient, less fossil fuel dependent, so that we can care for our planet for a long, long time that is here for a long, long time. And so I think those are just some of the ideas that I have. What do we do as individuals? What do we do as churches? And how can we advocate for our cities, for our neighborhoods, and for our global neighbors? We have a voice. How do we use that voice so that everybody can have what God has provided us to live with? How do we care for our creation? Thanks be to God.
Thank you so much, Dale.
Welcome.
A very comprehensive variety of things that we can do as individuals and as people of God, as congregations together to work for a more healthy and just world. Thank you. Next, we're going to invite Reverend Richenda Fairhurst to share, and she's an elder in the greater Northwest area. She's the organizing director of Circle Faith Future and organizes the Climate Cafe Multi-Faith with Faiths for Future. She's also active with the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement and serves on the board of Ecumenical Ministries of Oregon, where she chairs the Creation Justice Committee. And one of their programs is Oregon Interfaith Power and Light. So welcome, Reverend Richenda. Glad you're with us.
Hello, hello. Thank you so much for that introduction, Andrew. It's really wonderful to be here. A visitor, in a way. I live in Oregon, the land of the Tacoma and Shasta people, just 19 miles above the top of the California border, and really, really glad to be here. And Sharon had asked me to speak to the role of the church. And of course, there's the church big C and the church little c, the big church that brings so much of voice and moral and conscience together to speak in a big, big voice. But all that gets located right down at the local church. And so what I want to talk about a little is, what is it that gives us the authority, that gives, where do we start from? And I do have some slides to share, and then you can see that what we're really talking about here is, how do we live a restoration faith in the local church? And I know that we often think of ourselves as resurrection people, and I would like to encourage us to start thinking of ourselves as restoration people. And so what we're going to talk about, we're going to hit some points here: baptism and sanctuary and community. And these quotes that I've pulled out are from John and Charles Wesley. This is the preface from Wesley's Hymns and Sacred Poems, one of the editions of that, where he's speaking of hymnody. He is talking to the local church. He is talking to local people who come to the church, who are seeking God, who are living God, who are feeling that spirit move in their communities, and seeking to figure out, like, how is this good? How are we together? What does it mean to be a church together? So it starts with baptism. And Wesley writes, "It is only when we are knit together that we have nourishment from him and increase within the increase of God." And then we talk sanctuary, right? Church together in fellowship, in breaking bread, in praying with one accord. Rather than going off into the holy hills to be holy hermits, Wesley encourages us to be in community together and invests that with social holiness, with a social power together. Being together is what really is the expression of the Christian faith. And that brings us to community, to instruct, admonish, exhort, reprove, comfort, confirm, and in every way build each other up. So baptism, God said, let there be a dome in the middle of the waters to separate the waters from each other. God made the dome and separated the waters under the dome from the waters above the dome. And it happened in that way. Well, we are baptized into this same system of water, rivers of living water on earth and rainfall from the atmospheric rivers above. This is part of the local church, that water touching each and all of us. Sanctuary, Exodus, we in Exodus 3, we read, let them make me a sanctuary and I may dwell among them. Well, here's an expression as a California church, but here, listen to the way in Exodus that the making of the lampstand is instructed. 6 branches growing out from its side. One branch will have 3 cups shaped like an almond blossoms, each with a flower and petals, and the next branch will also have 3 cups shaped like almond blossoms, each with flower and petals. So it will be for the 6 branches that grow out of the lampstand. Sometimes we think our inner sanctuaries are away from nature, but here in the very beginning instructions, it is all about these expressions of nature as the almond trees and the buds and the blossoms and the branches come into the holiest of holies. And here we go, sanctuary again, right? Here we go, these beautiful oak trees in California. God said to Abraham, stand up and walk around through the length and breadth of the land because I am giving it to you. So Abram packed his tent and went and settled by the oaks of Mamre and Hebron, where he built an altar to the Lord. And here again is sanctuary from Psalm 104. The Lord's trees are well watered, the trees of Lebanon, the cedars of Lebanon, where God planted, where the birds make their nests, where the stork has a home in the cypresses, and where in California the redwoods reach for the heavens. And here we are, next piece, again, returning to that baptism and sanctuary is community. Instruct and admonish and confirm. I think sometimes we do kind of want to give a little bit of a nudge to our neighbor, right? If we're feeling like we're not living as God would have us live, and other times to affirm, but always to build each other up. And here we go. So what does it mean to be built up? What does all that community mean? Well, think about the story of the feeding of the 5,000s, of the loaves and the fishes, where Jesus becomes the central place of this absolute multiplicity, right? The multiplication of fish and bread and fullness and abundance. And this isn't like manna beamed from heaven, or it's all earthly. These are fish of the sea, of the earth, of the plenty that God has created for us. And read that together with this from Genesis. God created the great sea animals and all the tiny living things that swarm in the waters, each according to its kind, and all the winged birds, each according to its kind. And God saw how good it was. And then God blessed them, be fertile and multiply, and fill the waters and the seas, and let the birds multiply on the earth. Right? So how do we as a community live into this multiplication and abundance? So we have, by our baptism, been knit together. And we do that in the sanctuary and community of our local churches, where we know each other, where we care about each other, where we get irritated by each other, where we exhort each other, lift each other up, build each other, nudge each other. We work all of that out. And we do it if we are faithful in an expression of loving God, loving our neighbor, and loving the creation, because we're not separate. So what are some ways we can do that as a community in sanctuary together? Things like green teams, right? Bringing people together in the sanctuary, inside or out, in the place we are called to worship God, to be together and think about how can we be a restoration people here? How do we create a green team, green space? looking at our churchyards. Is this a sanctuary? Is this about multiplying life? Can things multiply here? Are there birds nesting here? Do you have birds nesting in your churchyard? And if you don't, it might be something you could really set your sights on. Hey, that's something we can really look at, how to make sure that that's happening. Are we feeding the butterflies? Do we have nice fat caterpillars in the spring for the birds to feed their babies with? Worship should always be about multiplication and abundance and the faith community together and knit together through baptism. Wild church, there are wild churches now where you can literally meet outdoors. That's where your church is. Partnerships, recognizing that we are one part of the community as the local church, and we are interconnected and connected with everything, not just the pollinators, but also our fellow people whom we might love or we might be irritated by, because after all, we're all human, we're kind of all rascally. But hey, God has called us to be together, that life together is much more rich and full and abundant than it would be otherwise, and called into those kind of communities in partnerships. Reinvestment and restoration, watching where our treasure is. What are we possessed by? Are we possessed of the Spirit? Or are we possessed by things like money? And really, really paying attention to what it means to live in community and be in community and to be a restoration people. So to be a restoration people, get convicted, right? Get convicted. And then do something about the harm you see. And the harm might be connected to creation and how we treat our neighbors. The harm might be connected to creation in that there is not enough health or well-being being provided to folks, like healthcare or things like that. Or it might be directly related to pollinators, where you are just convicted that we are going to make sure that we have pollinators visiting our churchyard. All of those things are good, and all of those create restoration. Gathering in strength together, understanding that we move from strength to strength together through our baptism in creating community, rising from the sanctuary together. So raise up prayer, hope, light, be a disciple as God has called us to be, and lead for a new time. The next set of slides are just a little bit of a visual meditation. I want you to think about, what does it mean to be a local church, to be planted in a place for the purposes of the expression of your baptism in the Holy Spirit, where you are for sanctuary and community and living that restoration. Not all of it is in any particular annual conference, but from across California. Just want to invite you to just sort of drink in these beautiful places where there are churches, where there is opportunity for a restoration people, where the earth cries out, where the creatures run. All the good, beautiful spaces. This is the local church, full of creatures, full of things that grow, landscapes of beauty. John Wesley has a poem, Hymn to the Creator, that starts immediately after the preface. It's the first hymn. And he draws forward a story from ancient times about how when God created the birds and all the things in creation and loved it and thought it was good. And one of the things that the birds did is they flew up in the high heavens and they could hear the songs of the angels, and they would hear the angels singing, and they would learn those songs. And then they would come back to the earth and to the trees and to the nests, and they would sing those songs of the angels, and the humans would hear them. And from that, we learned to sing. That is what John Wesley pulls out in his beautiful hymn to the Creator. Stop sharing. That is local church. That is local faith. That is local people. is a local baptism sanctuary and community. And that is my presentation and what I have brought to share today. May it find you with good heart and in great light. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Richenda, for that vision of a restoration people. And thank you. May it nourish our souls and inspire us.
Thank you, Andrew.
Next, we will invite Gregory Stevens to share with us. And Gregory is Northern California Director of Interfaith Power and Light, and he will share on the many roles that churches can take. He will share resources on developing our congregations into resiliency hubs, while also troubling the notion of resilience in relation to our climate justice work and the larger faith-based environmental movement. Welcome, Gregory. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Hey, friends. So we've been at this for a while now. And there's this quote that's been going on, and I got a lot of energy still. There's this quote, though, that's on the tip of my tongue, or mine, John Wesley. Light yourself on fire with passion, and people will come from miles to watch you burn. So I come from a Baptist background, even though I work for an interfaith group. I'm hanging out with some Methodists, and I'm a Unitarian. But it was Tony Campolo who really opened my eyes with a little passion and fury, a good Baptist preacher, who said, and now you know this, Palm Sunday is coming, Easter is coming, we're almost there for the big resurrection day. But Tony said, it's Friday, Good Friday. The oceans are acidified, the songbirds are dying, the rivers are going, the trees are going, but Sunday is coming. And as a resurrection people, we know that it's Friday. The oil spills are big, that Ohio is happening, that it's all not very good, but Sunday is coming. And think about that, the palms that they were laying before Jesus, not the big banners that were waving high for Caesar on the other side, but they were welcoming in their lowly servant with palm branch, with the very earth that they were created from, and waving them and welcoming him by saying, on your donkey, being a homeless man who calls us all to our best selves, we're going to wave an earth branch in front of you and say, make and light the way, show us the way. And it doesn't take a massive social movement. It doesn't take big wig solutions. It takes 12 homeboys hanging out together with a bunch of other small churches, networked together, challenging these systems together. Because it feels like Friday, but Sunday's coming. One of my other favorite poets, remember, we need creativity in our movement, right? We can't always feel despair because it's pretty scary if you read the news. Is Job, though. So Job from the Hebrew tradition, but also ours, so the tradition that we Christians birthed ourselves out from, right? This is great. Job 12, he says, or they say, but ask the animals and they will teach you. Ask the birds of the air and they will tell you. Ask the plants of the earth and they will teach you, and ask the fish of the sea who will declare to you. Who among all these does not know that the hand of the Lord has done this? In their hand is the life of every being and every breath of every human being. Now, next time you're wondering what's the solution to climate change, open up Job to chapter 12, 7 through 12 and read, ask the animals. All right, now I've yet to even say what I do or who I am. Hi, I'm Gregory. I use they and he pronouns. I work for California Faith, Power and Light. I know I was introduced, but I like to say that a little bit. I come to California, and I have to say this too, because we're on a call with a bunch of Methodists. I come to California because of my Methodist family. So I was first introduced to climate thinking and ecological thinking and eco-theology and climate thought through Claremont School of Theology. And a lot of the work, remember John Cobb, this diehard Methodist in 1974 or something, writes the book, Is It Too Late? And now it's 2024 and we're still 2023 and we're still talking about, is it too late? And so my United Methodist family was way ahead of the thinking. And so that drew me to Claremont. Claremont was also doing interfaith work at the time. And that also excited me. And so if you think about that, climate, interfaith, well, now I have the great job of being California Interfaith Power and Lights director, or Northern California director. So I've taken my environmentalism and meshed it with my, what was I saying? I've lost my train of thought. Anyways, with my interfaith movement work, there it is. Sorry, sometimes I get too excited, y'all. And if you know anything about Claremont, we just found a new building. It's in a great spot of LA. It'll be very exciting. Yay. But wrong conference. Anyways, looking at my notes here. So one of the things that California Interfaith Power and Light does, or did 20 years ago, was bring up this idea of interfaith, which was contentious then and is now. But also, we called it global warming then. We now call it climate change because we know that global warming is just one of the symptoms, right? But back then, that was pretty scary 20 years ago for many of us. For me, especially, only 10 years ago was when I came to California and started learning about these ideas. And so it was cool for me to kind of hear that this position was open, because I was like, wow, 20 years ago, you guys were doing this. And since being on staff, one of the things I've learned is that we as an environmental movement have learned something. And it's that frontline communities, BIPOC, Black, Indigenous people of color, people who live in neighborhoods that some call ghettos, have been siloed there, redlined there, forced there, and then it's by a wayside, a dump site. But these folks have been screaming, shouting, don't do that to us. But no one has been listening. And so it's so cool and nice to be a part of this environmental movement, because people seem to finally be listening to the cries of the suffering, of the poor, of the marginalized, of those being exploited, intentionally so. And so what's so fun about California Interfaith Power and Light now is that we're trying to work with frontline communities that are experiencing the worst parts of climate change, and to equip them with the tools, kind of like the expensive tech tools that communities that are under-resourced wouldn't have access to. So like solar panels and battery backup and air filtration systems that cost gobs of money. And so we try to create these networks of people and partners, financial partners and donors and grantors, so that we can create what's called a resilience hub. And so this is the thing we're trying to move into, is create resilience. Now, we want to create resilience hubs in every community, but frontline communities are our priority, obviously, because every community can do it, and a frontline community needs a little support because they've been exploited financially, systemically, and all the other reasons, right? But what a resilience hub is as we, let me check my time here. All right. What a resilience hub is as we experience the changes in our climate. I don't know, I live in San Francisco, and last year or 2 years ago, the sky was red for a whole day. And it felt like you literally were walking in the book of Revelation. You were like, whoa, it's happening, now's the time, why am I not gone yet? No, but the sky was red, and it was frightening and scary, and it was a whole day. Now, I'm from Florida, and so I'm used to like hurricanes and stuff. And when a hurricane comes, the weather will get weird, the sky will turn a weird color. We all nudge each other and like, well, if the sky is gray at night, then the moon delight, or whatever the sailor's saying is. But in reality, when the sky's red all day, it no longer is like, oh, climate change is coming. It's more like, I can't breathe outside. I can't even go outside. And so what we're trying to do is equip communities in the front lines who, hey, say your power goes out. Where do you go? Well, instead of going to like the DMV or maybe like a government space, which is very needed, public libraries, let's have a moment and say public libraries will also be a wonderful, resilient space, and may books not be banned, but accepted, loved, and read. But well, a church is the same way, where I want to go to the library or a church if a disaster happens. I do not want to go to a government office. And it's also my church, or maybe it's a friend's church. And so it's a safe space, but it's where I can charge my medical devices if the power's out. But because this church is a resilient center, a hub for resiliency, it's not only teaching, advocating, and acting on behalf of, it's got the battery backup. And so you can plug your phone in. Now, we're learning. And I must say, where I've learned a lot from is from Pastor John Current at Faith, United Methodist down in South San Francisco. And I'm learning with him. So I come in and I say, so we got solar, we got battery backup, let's go. Well, the other day, a rainstorm hits, and the battery goes out, or the power goes out. Well, so John goes, Pastor John, I'm gonna get my car, go to the church, flick the battery on, and he can't turn the garage door opener open because the power's out. But it's little things like this that we have to remember when we talk about resilience hubs. And this is where my little bio, where I said I want to trouble resilience, this is where it comes from, is we can't just slap some solar panels and a battery backup on your church and call it a resilience hub. We have to remember that there are so many players and intersections and injustices and webs of experience that are holding us here, that are oppressing us and keeping us in this space. And we're going to push back against those a little bit by saying, hey, we got power, we got solar, we got battery, but we're not necessarily going to change all of those systems with our centers. But we have to remember that we can't leave these centers to do it on their own. And we need to begin to train each other in what it means to be in the long-term fight. To be, Indigenous people have taught me that is solutions are not simple. Solutions are intergenerational. 7 generations is one of the youth orgs that I've worked with before, and they refer to thinking about social change as 7 generations out, which to me is unfathomable, right? I don't think like that. But thank goodness I have had Indigenous folks help me kind of navigate what it means to have their entire cultures wiped out, and still pushed back, because Frederick Douglass did say power concedes nothing without a demand. And so they have been demanding and demanding and demanding. And now what's funny is the modern environmental movement is now looking to Indigenous people to figure out solutions for the future. So when you feel like you're fighting and you're pushing and you're trying to change your light bulbs and take shorter showers and vote for the right person and join the social movement, just know that you're doing it, and that doesn't feel like it. But that's a spiritual practice, and it's powerful. And it's a helpful reminder that you are defending what you love, and that the songbirds are dying and the trees are dying and the oceans are acidified, but you are defending what you love. I think about it that way with my family. If someone were to come and bang down the door, I wouldn't go, well, what are all the right solutions? And do I do this correctly? I would just act. And I must say, I don't know if I would act perfectly or rightly, but I would defend what I love. And so California Interfaith Power and Light and I am here to help you and your congregation defend what you love. If you love the natural environment that your church is in, if you simply love the little children that nibble on those crumbly cookies over Folgers coffee at coffee time, if you love that, then let's join together and make your church a resilience hub, or at least a space that can communicate ideas about climate justice, where we're no longer thinking about climate change, we're thinking about justice and making the world a better place for those who've experienced some of the worst effects of climate change that some of the people who experience none of it have caused. I think I'll close with, oh, actually, let me say one more thing. How much time? With 3 minutes, let me say one more thing. Imagine having a cold and someone saying the solution to your cold is wiping your nose. Imagine having COVID. The solution to COVID is covering your mouth when you cough. We know that these systems are way more complex than that. Yet, you better isolate, you better get your vaccination, you better mask up, you better eat healthy, you better maybe exercise, you might take your vitamin. You do a lot of things to make sure that you're healthy, happy, and whatnot. And so when we think about climate change, don't just think about the symptoms. Think about, there's something deeper here going on. There's something about the way in which we've organized society socially and economically that's deeper than the symptoms. And so we need to fix the symptoms, or we can work on the symptoms. Wipe your nose, cover your mouth, please. But also take note of the fact that you've got a cold or that you have COVID, that there's a deeper system there, and that Jesus calls us to bring the kingdom of heaven here now and not wait for their system to work out. So let's live like the kingdom of heaven is here now.
Yeah, thank you, Gregory, and for helping us taste a little bit of Sunday here when it really does feel like we're in the midst of Friday. So next we will welcome Kristina Sinks to share with us. Candidate Kristina Sinks is a candidate for deacon in the Cal Nevada Annual Conference, currently working for Green Faith, a great organization. And she's going to explore and share with us the role of the church in offering some of the beauty and power of creation in worship, liturgy, and theology in the context of climate justice. So welcome, Kristina. Thank you for being with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. So glad to be here, and thanks for the introduction. I am a deacon candidate in California, Nevada, hoping to be approved by Boom and the clergy session this year for commissioning. And excited to share a little bit about my work and kind of a reflection on why good theology for creation, justice, and worship is so important to me. So a little bit about what I'm doing work-wise. I work at Green Faith, where I serve as operations and digital associate, and I support the work of our brave, courageous activists all around the world who are faith activists in pursuit of climate justice. And then I also sing with a band called The Many, which is focused on progressive, justice-focused music for Christians. And so we sing at conferences all over the country and do kind of a variety of other things, liturgy and spoken word, as well as music that has spoken really deeply to me and to many other people. And I'm excited to let y'all know that we are actually sharing in worship with the California Nevada Annual Conference this June. So our band will be helping lead worship there. And I'm really excited to bring them out and for that opportunity. And I thought to start out this time of my sharing, I wanted to share a song that The Many has written and performed, and that will kind of like set the tone for the rest of what I share.
Here we are here, living our lives on the earth. Here we are here, humans of the earth, made of love, made to love, loving earth as we love ourselves, all of life, all creation, loving earth as we love ourselves, all of life, all creation. From living soil we were formed, you breathed into us living souls. From living soil we were formed, you breathed into us living souls. So here we are together here, people of the earth, made of love, made to love, loving earth as we love ourselves, all of life, all creation, loving earth as we love ourselves, all of life, all creation.
Thanks for taking a minute to watch that with me. What I'll share about my thoughts about theology and worship and what we are called to in terms of creation justice is that it's such a deeply intersectional call that we are called to as part of the creation justice movement. And that's something that singing with the many has really been instrumental for me in learning that we're a group that's committed to LGBTQ inclusion in the church, to economic justice, to racial justice, to eco-justice, and kind of all of the ways those things intersect. And this comes, I think, out of a belief in collective salvation and in the deep solidarity that's required to make salvation possible. And that's something that's not just for us people as part of the world, but also for creation and the animals and the plants and the earth itself, as we know as eco-theologians and people who care about creation justice. And for me, with the music and worship arts lens, what's really critical here is that music and worship arts are tools that we can use to infuse our congregations with this theology, ways that we can make that theology take root in people's hearts, right? And so at best, what we can give our congregations in worship is a theology that is life-giving and constructive. And so I'll tell a short story about what this has meant to me, kind of from a different angle. And I hope you can see how that points to the importance of good eco-theology in worship and being intentional about that. So for me, in my church where I grew up in Los Altos, we sang songs about all people being welcome at the table, right? Songs like For Everyone Born. And when I came out as queer, I didn't wonder what my church would think about me because I knew we had sung these songs, right? This had been displayed as a value of ours that was important, that we held dear, and that was something that became part of the soundtrack of our lives. And that wasn't by accident, right? It wasn't just like, oh, well, I guess we'll sing this song, right? This is something where something that could seem controversial or a bit of a challenge to believe is intentionally chosen from the songwriter, from the people planning worship, from the people, putting together the hymnals, putting together the worship resources, all the way to choosing to do that song in worship on Sunday. That these are intentional choices to include theology that expands our view of God and of who is included. And so I wonder what it would look like if our music and our worship also spoke boldly and really specifically about what creation care and creation justice are needed from us to provide to the earth and to provide to the least of these that are suffering from climate disasters. What would it look like to specifically involve the ecosystems and the creatures around us in our neighborhoods, in our watersheds that are suffering from our actions, that might be facing extinction or habitat destruction? What would it mean to name them in our prayers, to sing about them? Maybe if those things took root in us, and this is kind of my dream and my great vision of eco-theology and worship that is happening in many ways, but we need so much more of it, that those theologies would also become part of the soundtrack of our lives, the things that we turn to when we don't have time to think about, oh, what's right and wrong here? No, we know what's right and wrong, right? It's rooted in us by the theology that we have been imparted and that we have made our own. And so I think recognizing the power of what we preach and sing and pray in church is so critical to this project of creation justice. And for me, and I hope for many of you also, the work is to help us use that opportunity to build up disciples of Jesus who are able to go out into the world with life-giving theology that helps them seek that intersectional justice, that collective salvation, where we understand that issues like queer inclusion, like creation justice, racial justice, nonviolence, gun control are critical to our collective survival as a species and as a whole of creation, right? God's creation. And so I just really believe strongly in that, and I love singing about it, and I'm excited about more and more people understanding that what we do in worship is a practice and a rehearsal of what we're doing out in the world and how we're living out our faith, whether that's in our political work, whether that's in how we treat our neighbors, whether that's in how we're parenting our children and teaching our children, and so much more. So I have a brief invitation to kind of close out my reflection here. part of this work for me is helping to lead a group via the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement. And that group is a worship working group. We're just kind of getting on our feet and getting started, but what we've done so far has been a great project, which is putting together a worship series for this Eastertide season. So I'll share briefly what that looks like. And then I'll invite you to join us if you're interested. So a great team of volunteers has put together this lectionary-based worship series called New Life is Breaking Forth. And each week we have all these resources put together that you see here based on creatures that are facing habitat destruction or extinction or other issues, and how we can care for them better. So I encourage you to check this out. If you don't have an Eastertide series yet at your church, if you'd like to promote this to your pastor or your worship team, that there's a lot here, even down to music created by Lori Bain, a pastor in our own conference, who kind of wrote music to echo the songs of birds, which I so love that. And it's such a beautiful way to weave this all together. So if this is interesting to you, maybe we can share a link in a follow-up email or something like that. And my last thing will be to invite you to be part of this work. Actually, Reverend Richenda is here and has also been a really big part of this project. And so if you want to be part of this work, we're meeting again on April 11th, and we're going to be looking ahead to the fall season of creation. And we actually have some really great partnerships with the United Methodist Discipleship Ministries, which is promoting our work. And in the future, we plan to work with them more closely to kind of get this eco-theology and worship more on the map. And so just delighted to be part of that work and to be leading a group of really wonderful and dedicated and wise people. So that's what I have to share this evening, and I'm grateful for the invitation to be here and to join you all.
Thank you, Kristina. Very inspiring. I'm so glad you were able to be here with us tonight, and it's wonderful what the work that you're doing. We do follow it. I follow it, and we have posted that link that shows that worship resources that you're talking about in our monthly newsletter, and we'll continue to put the word out about that. So great. Thank you. And I just wanted to close tonight by just saying it. This was so rich to hear the different perspectives on the role of the church, and there's so much more. We could have a conversation that goes on, but this was wonderful sharing and diversity of views and of ideas of what people could do. I think of the church as I hear, as I've heard tonight, a community of restoration. I love that. A community really of reconciliation. We are United Methodists. We can talk with each other. We can get irritated and annoyed with each other. We can be in congregations that have different views, and because we love each other, we can talk about these things. That's not always done, but that it's really a good opportunity for us to do that. It's a prophetic community, the church. It's we call people back to the world that and the vision that Jesus put forward of the reign of God, what some people call the kingdom of God. And our churches, I think of our churches as being called to be embodying the world, the community of people as God intends for the world to be. And so that's an opportunity for us to live into, and a community of praise for all creation. We gather to praise, whether inside or outside. I love those visions and the idea of wild church that I'm going to get to participate in very soon at a retreat in Kirkridge, Pennsylvania. It is the idea of gathering to praise the one who John Wesley called the soul of the universe. And I do want to invite people to sign up for our newsletter. We're sending it out to some people. We're hoping to expand our list. It does come out in the Instant Connection every month. I want to remember and remind us all that it's not just California, it's also Oregon. So Oregonians, you're not forgotten, and we appreciate you. And some of you are involved in the advocacy and justice work of this conference, and in the climate justice ministries work that we're doing as well. And I'm going to put up a final slide that after the closing prayer, that gives you a link to the website. Not a website, that's coming. A website is coming. A link to the Facebook page and an email address for signing up for the newsletter, and also the link where you can go back and watch the other videos, the 5 other videos leading up to this final video. But this was remarkable, and I really appreciate everybody who spoke tonight and shared their vision and their ideas about the role of the church. And I want to close with a prayer and benediction from the 2009 Bishop's Resource, God's Renewed Creation, which has also been updated. So this is the benediction for this and for this webinar series. May God's grace purify our reason, strengthen our will, and guide our action. May the love of God, the peace of Christ, and the power of the Holy Spirit be among you everywhere and always, so that you may be a blessing to all creation and to all the children of God, making peace, nurturing and practicing hope, choosing life, and coming to life eternal. Amen.